Brilliant. So I'm here with Eleanor, who has just completed her MA, and she was studying with the UWTSD, the University of Wales Trinity St David. But you've just completed your masters, so congratulations, Eleanor. It's all finished,
Thank you very much.
and great to have you here speaking with us this morning. So, Eleanor, I wonder if you could think back to the beginning of the MA and your reasons, motivations for starting the masters.
Yeah, of course. Well, I had worked primarily as a singer, as a classically trained choral singer. And I'd done some teaching with that. I'd always thought I didn't want to do teaching at all. And then I fell into it because it was required as part of the job. And I found I loved it. So I ended up, first of all, working workshops, working with small ensembles, and then I ended up teaching singing lessons in a school. And then I was always aware, I didn't even do a music degree. I studied maths, but I was a choral scholar, and that was my route into singing. And I didn't have any teacher training at all. So I'd always felt that I was rather underqualified, and I also found that it excluded me from some jobs. Some jobs required a music degree or a teaching qualification. So I always had this idea that I should try and do some kind of qualification. And then the timing was just right. I had my first child. I'd stopped touring, so I was really changing my work and moving away from performing towards teaching. And it was 2020 and the pandemic hit, so I had much less work anyway, and I had the time. Um, and I looked at the course, and I initially started, I think it was a PG cert, it was a smaller one. And it just looked right for me. It looked like an interesting course, something that I could do in my own time.
Mhm.
So I decided to go for it.
Yeah, super, great. So I wonder if you could think about some of the most exciting parts of the course. What were some of the most memorable things you studied?
Well, I mean, firstly, just the whole idea of academic research, because I did a maths degree. I had never done any research like this. I've
Mhm.
always loved writing, but
Mhm.
I'd never really done that as part of my studies or my work. And finally, sort of getting to know this way of writing people had of doing this research, of putting in the references that was would have been like a foreign language to me before.
Mhm.
And then it felt like piecing together a jigsaw. The skill of getting all this information and putting it into a coherent structure and telling a story with it. That was something that I absolutely loved, the whole
Mhm.
idea of. So that was one of the most exciting moments at the start. Then I
Mhm.
think there were a few, but I picked the first one, which was when I worked on breathing and teaching children to breathe, was that moment of having always had a very hazy knowledge of something, not really knowing what I was doing,
Mhm.
and then reading the literature and, well, in some ways finding that lots of people didn't really know what they were doing, and that the evidence was not conclusive, and that people disagreed, and feeling that it was okay that I felt confused because
Mhm.
there wasn't really a coherent body of evidence, but also being able to take some of that and actually knowing what I was talking about. So in the
Mhm.
case of this first one, breathing, I didn't know how the lungs worked before that. I
Mhm.
was I was teaching to people to breathe, but I just didn't know what was going on. And it was so
Mhm.
exciting to understand that, and to be able to make sense of things that teachers had told me that I
Mhm.
hadn't previously understood. They'd gone straight over my head. And that
Mhm.
happened for a few different modules of breathing. I did one on
Mhm.
intonation, one on learning by ear, and the same thing happened each time. But the most exciting one for me was my final module, the
Mhm.
biggest research module, where I wanted to look into the educational backgrounds of professional choral singers, because I worked in that world and it felt very much dominated by those who'd been to private school and studied at Oxbridge. And I wanted to look into this, see if it was true, and see what the reasons were, what I could do about this. And I think one of the reasons this was so exciting was because people clearly really cared about this. I got so many responses, which I know is often the hard part of research, trying to get the answers in the first place. I got so many responses. I spoke to so many really interesting people, often people I had known already as singers and had no idea that they had come from such atypical backgrounds, often not from classical music families. And it was such a lovely thing to bring these people together and to talk to them and get all their views. And most exciting of all, of course, is that I hope I will be able to use this to try and improve things.
Yeah, oh, super. So it sounds like your master's journey was really, really rich and varied from aspects of pedagogy, pedagogical tools, to thinking more broadly about the classical music and choral music industry. So
Yeah.
it seems like it was incredibly broad. How did you choose those topics? Because I mean, voice pedagogy is a massive subject, isn't it? Voice studies is absolutely enormous. So how did you hone down your areas of interest
It
throughout the
was
masters?
tricky. Yeah, it was tricky because I know some people come to the course with very specific ideas. I had ideas of questions that occurred to me while I was teaching, but I didn't really have any sense of specific
Mm,
questions. And it was hard with so many different questions, thinking, what do I do? And every module was on something different. So I was
mhm,
always starting afresh. Um, I think it always became obvious at the time that I had to decide. I would always feel there was one question that was a real burning question. I think um, something that I knew I really wanted to be able to answer
mhm,
for the teaching that I was doing or had been doing. Then the final module, of course, that's not something that I'm going to be necessarily, putting into practice in my individual singing lessons, but it it was an obvious choice for me because I
mhm,
felt like the one question I had where I could really make a difference. The
mhm,
others, they helped me with the work that I was doing. They helped me with my understanding and how I teach, but they weren't things that I was going to go on and, see if I could get published and
mhm,
use an advocacy and see if I could bring
mhm,
about some bigger changes. So that just seemed like the obvious choice, the most
mhm.
important question, really.
Yeah, super. So that kind of brings us to thinking about what next. So you've just completed your masters, a huge achievement. And what's next for your teaching and potentially for your research journey as well?
Well, yeah, I'll my teaching, I think it's carrying on. I teach, or I'm just starting another school. I teach in a couple of schools. And now that I have the time that I'm not doing the research alongside that, I really want to work on how I can improve my teaching in those lessons based on what I've learnt from the masters, because there's
Mhm,
a lot that I've learnt and I haven't quite had time to integrate yet. Um, but I do want to work to see what I can do with my final research project because the results I got from that I think are really compelling, and I almost feel a duty to try and use that to try and make some changes. I also want to do some more training, try some new ideas that are linked to that, because one of the ideas that came out of that research is the ideas of working with methods like the Kadai approach that really help musical literacy in large numbers of people. So I want to see if I can go on, do some more training in that, try and set up some groups in schools locally, because I haven't really. I've worked with small ensembles, mainly adults when it's been groups. I haven't done that. I work with real groups of children and
mhm,
teaching the musicianship. I love musicianship, but it's not something I've explicitly taught. So lots of areas that I really want to
mhm.
start exploring now.
Oh, brilliant. Well, it sounds like there's an exciting period ahead. So that's really, really great to hear. Well, thank you so much for chatting with us this morning. It's fascinating to hear about your master's journey and how this has really excited you for the future.